You watched her pack her bags after 15 years together, and the only explanation she gave you was that she felt invisible. You sat there trying to compute what that meant because you were right there. You saw her every day. You talked to her. You provided for the family. You showed up to every obligation. But somewhere in her mind you had become a ghost in your own home, and she needed to leave to feel alive again. You are not alone in this experience. There is a pattern happening across thousands of households where women in their 40s are walking away from relationships with neurodivergent men, and the reasons go far deeper than what gets discussed in couples therapy or what shows up in the divorce papers. The truth is that something fundamental shifts in a woman's psychology around this age, and when that shift meets the specific dynamics of being partnered with a neurodivergent man, the relationship often cannot survive the collision. Here is what nobody wants to tell you. When a woman crosses into her 40s, her brain starts operating on a completely different priority system than it did in her 20s and 30s. The same woman who once found your intense focus endearing now experiences it as abandonment. The same woman who appreciated your logical approach to problems now feels emotionally starved by it. The same woman who admired your dedication to your interests now resents the energy you pour into everything except her. And the difficult reality is that she is not wrong for feeling this way, and you are not wrong for being who you are. But that does not mean the relationship can continue. What you are experiencing is the consequence of a neurological incompatibility that could remain dormant for years or even decades before suddenly becoming intolerable. And that suddenly is the key word here, because from your perspective, she changed overnight. But from her perspective, she has been slowly dying inside for years, and you never noticed. The 40s represent a psychological inflection point for women that most people do not fully understand. Throughout their 20s and 30s, women are typically operating in what researchers call the caretaking and accommodation phase. They are biologically and culturally primed to nurture, to adapt, to smooth over difficulties, to make things work. A woman in this phase will compensate for a partner's executive function challenges. She will create systems to manage the household because she sees that you struggle with it. She will translate your literal communication to family members who find you too direct. She will explain to friends why you did not make it to their event. She will run interference with your children when your sensory overload makes you less available than they need. She will essentially build a support structure around your neurodivergence without you even realizing that is what she is doing. And she will do this not because she is a martyr, but because this is what her brain is telling her relationships require. But here is the thing that changes everything. Somewhere around 40, a woman's brain starts asking a different question. Instead of asking, how can I make this work? It starts asking, what am I getting from this? This shift happens for neurological and hormonal reasons that have nothing to do with you. As women approach perimenopause, their estrogen levels become erratic, and estrogen is the hormone that has been largely responsible for their capacity to accommodate and nurture beyond their own needs. When estrogen starts declining, that selfless accommodation starts declining with it. The brain structures that drove her to care for others above herself start demanding that she care for herself. This is not selfishness. This is biology. The same woman who could once manage your executive function challenges while working full-time and raising children suddenly finds that she does not have the neurological bandwidth to do that anymore. Her brain is literally telling her that she cannot continue sacrificing her needs to compensate for your challenges. And when she looks at the relationship through this new lens, what she sees is devastating. She sees years of emotional labor that you never acknowledged because you did not perceive it as labor. She sees conversations where she tried to tell you what she needed, and you responded with logical solutions instead of emotional connection. She sees special occasions you forgot or failed to plan because time blindness made them slip past you. She sees herself trying to get your attention while you were hyper-focused on something that mattered more to you than she did. Or at least, that is how it felt to her. You want to know why this seems to happen suddenly when women hit their 40s? because that is when their capacity to keep compensating runs out at the exact same time. Their willingness to keep compensating disappears. For 15 years, she might have been managing the household calendar because you struggle with time perception. She might have been initiating every serious conversation because you do not naturally think to check in emotionally. She might have been explaining your behavior to extended family because you communicate in ways that others find too blunt or too withdrawn. And every single time she did these things, she was making a withdrawal from her own energy reserves to keep the relationship functioning. In her 20s and 30s, those reserves felt infinite. In her 40s, she suddenly realizes the account is empty, and she has been running on fumes for years. The moment that realization hits, everything changes. She cannot unsee it. She cannot go back to accommodating without resentment. And that resentment, once it takes root, grows fast. The neurodivergent brain processes relationships differently than the neurotypical brain expects. And this difference creates specific friction points that become unbearable for women in this life stage. When you hyper-focus on your work or your interests, your brain is doing exactly what it is designed to do. You are engaging with something that provides dopamine, that makes sense to you, that you can control and predict and master. There is nothing wrong with this. But while you are in that state of hyper-focus, you are essentially unavailable to your partner. You might be physically in the same room, but you are not present. You do not notice her facial expressions. You do not pick up on her tone of voice. You do not track whether she has eaten or seems stressed or needs help with something. And because your brain does not naturally monitor these social and emotional cues, you have no idea that you are failing to meet her needs. She, on the other hand, is acutely aware that she is alone, even though you are right there. For a woman in her 20s or 30s, she might tell herself that you are working hard to provide for the family, that your focus is admirable, that she should not be so needy. But a woman in her 40s is done telling herself those stories. She knows she has emotional needs, and she knows you are not meeting them, and she no longer has the energy or the willingness to pretend that is okay. Here is another truth that creates problems in these relationships. The neurodivergent brain often struggles with what neuropsychologists call mental flexibility or cognitive shifting. You develop routines and systems because they help you manage a world that otherwise feels chaotic and overwhelming. You eat the same foods. You follow the same schedule. You resist changes to plans because change requires enormous mental energy for you. This is not stubbornness. This is your brain trying to conserve cognitive resources. But your partner experiences this as rigidity. She experiences this as you caring more about your routine than about her needs. She suggests trying a new restaurant, and you resist because new environments stress you out. She wants to go on a spontaneous weekend trip, and you struggle because you had other plans, and shifting gears feels impossible. She wants to have friends over, and you decline because social situations drain you. Each individual instance seems small, but over 15 or 20 years, these small instances accumulate into a massive pile of evidence that you will choose your comfort over her desires every single time. And again, in her 30s, she might have accepted this. She might have told herself that everyone has limitations and relationships require compromise. But in her 40s, she looks at that pattern and realizes she has been doing all the compromising while you have been protecting your routines. The communication differences between neurodivergent and neurotypical brains create another layer of relationship damage that becomes unforgivable in this life stage. You communicate to exchange information. She communicates to create connection. When she comes to you with a problem, she is not actually asking you to solve it most of the time. She is asking you to understand how she feels about it. She wants empathy, validation, emotional presence. But your brain hears a problem and immediately starts generating solutions, because that is what problems are for, solving. So she tells you she had a difficult day and feels overwhelmed, and you respond by suggesting ways she could manage her time better or offering to take some tasks off her plate. You think you are being helpful. She thinks you are dismissing her feelings. You tell her the facts of what happened in a situation, and she gets upset because you did not consider how she would feel about those facts. You think you are being honest and direct. She thinks you are being insensitive. These mismatches in communication style happen hundreds or thousands of times across years of relationship, and each one is a tiny cut. Individually they heal, collectively they leave scars. And when a woman hits her 40s and her brain stops accommodating and starts evaluating, she looks at all those scars and realizes you have been hurting her for years without even knowing it. If this is hitting home for you, if you are recognizing patterns from your own relationship, hit that subscribe button, because we are going deeper into the psychology that nobody explains to you about why these relationships fall apart when they do. This is not about blame. This is about understanding what actually happens in these dynamics so you can see the fuller picture. The executive function challenges that come with many forms of neurodivergence create a particular kind of burden on romantic partners that becomes unbearable over time. Executive function is essentially the management system of your brain. It handles planning, organizing, initiating tasks, following through on commitments, managing time, and regulating your responses. When executive function is impaired, you might genuinely intend to do something, but then forget about it completely. You might know intellectually that something needs to happen, but struggle to actually start doing it. You might lose track of time and show up late despite caring about being punctual. You might agree to handle a responsibility, and then it just never gets done because your brain did not prioritize it or remind you or push you to follow through. None of this is intentional. None of this is because you do not care. But your partner does not live inside your brain. She only sees the outcome. She sees that you forgot her birthday again. She sees that the thing you promised to fix 3 months ago still is not fixed. She sees that you did not notice the kids needed supplies for school tomorrow until she mentioned it. She sees that you committed to being somewhere and then lost track of time and left her making excuses for why you are not there yet. In the early years of a relationship, she compensates for these challenges by becoming the executive function for both of you. She keeps the calendar. She sends reminders. She follows up on things you agreed to do. She builds systems that work around your challenges. And in her 20s and 30s, she might not even consciously recognize that this is what she is doing. It just feels like being a good partner, like taking care of the relationship. But executive function is exhausting work. It requires constant mental energy to track everything, to plan ahead, to remember what needs to happen when, to follow through and follow up and make sure nothing falls through the cracks. When you are doing executive function for 2 people, for a household, possibly for children as well, you are essentially working a second full-time job that nobody pays you for and nobody thanks you for because they do not realize you are doing it. By the time a woman hits her 40s and that neurological shift happens, she is burned out from years of doing this invisible labor. And the moment she stops accommodating, the moment she stops compensating for your executive function challenges, everything starts falling apart. Appointments get missed, bills get paid late, important dates get forgotten, and she watches this happen and realizes that she was the only thing holding everything together, and you never even noticed. The sensory processing differences that often accompany neurodivergence create yet another dimension of relationship difficulty that women in this age group stop tolerating. Your nervous system might be wired to experience sensory input more intensely than the average person. Sounds that others barely notice might feel physically painful to you. Certain textures of clothing might be genuinely intolerable. Bright lights or busy environments might overwhelm your system so completely that you shut down or need hours to recover. The feeling of being touched when you are not expecting it might trigger a stress response in your nervous system. None of this is your fault. This is neurological. This is real. But your partner experiences this as you rejecting her. She reaches for your hand and you pull away because unexpected touch stresses your system. She thinks you do not want physical connection with her. She wants to go to a concert or a party, and you resist because the noise and the crowds will overwhelm you. She thinks you do not want to spend time with her doing things she enjoys. She wears a perfume she loves and you ask her not to, because the smell is too strong for your sensitive system. She thinks you are criticizing her. Over the years, these rejections accumulate. She stops reaching for you because she has learned you will probably pull away. She stops inviting you to things because she knows you will probably say no. She stops wearing things you might react negatively to. Essentially, she makes herself smaller and smaller to avoid triggering your sensory issues. And by the time she hits her 40s and starts asking what she is getting from this relationship, the answer is a partner who seems to reject her touch, who does not want to do activities with her, who needs her to constantly manage her own behavior to avoid overwhelming him. The social challenges that neurodivergent men often face create a specific dynamic where the female partner becomes responsible for managing all of the relationship's social connections and obligations. You might struggle to read social cues, to know when to speak and when to stay quiet, to gauge how much information is appropriate to share in a given context, to remember details about people's lives that you are supposed to ask about when you see them, to engage in small talk that feels pointless to you, to pretend to be interested in conversations that bore you. Again, none of this is a character flaw. This is your brain processing social information differently. But what this means practically is that your partner becomes the social manager for your entire household. She maintains the friendships. She remembers birthdays and buys gifts. She arranges get-togethers. She does the emotional labor of staying connected to both of your families. She makes excuses when you do not show up, or when you say something too direct, or when you seem disengaged. She essentially runs social interference so that people do not take offense at behavior that you do not realize is offensive. And she does this for years, for decades sometimes, until she hits her 40s and suddenly realizes she has been doing all of this work alone. She realizes that if she stopped managing the social calendar, you would have no social connections outside of maybe your co-workers. She realizes that your families stay connected to you only because she maintains those connections. She realizes that she has been performing a massive amount of labor to keep you integrated in a social world that you do not naturally navigate well. And she gets tired. She gets resentful. She wonders why she should have to do all of this when you seem perfectly content to have no social life at all. One of the most painful dynamics in these relationships involves what researchers call emotional reciprocity, or the mutual exchange of emotional support and understanding. In a healthy relationship, both partners attune to each other's emotional states, offer comfort during difficult times, celebrate during good times, and maintain an ongoing awareness of how the other person is doing. But the neurodivergent brain often does not naturally track other people's emotional states unless that information is explicitly communicated. You might not notice that your partner has been unusually quiet. You might not pick up on the tension in her voice or the sadness in her expression. You might not think to ask how her day was, or how she is feeling about a stressful situation she mentioned last week. This is not because you do not care. This is because your brain does not automatically run that monitoring program in the background the way neurotypical brains do. But from her perspective, you never ask about her. You never seem to notice when she is struggling. You never offer support unless she explicitly asks for it, and even then you might offer solutions instead of comfort. She, meanwhile, has spent years or decades monitoring your emotional state, checking in with you, offering support, trying to understand what you need. The exchange is not reciprocal. She gives far more emotional attention than she receives, and in her 20s and 30s she might have told herself that men are just not as emotionally aware, that she should not expect too much, that it is normal for women to do more emotional labor. But in her 40s, that story stops working. She knows she has emotional needs, and she knows you are not meeting them, and she knows that you will probably never meet them the way she needs you to, because your brain does not work that way. If you have ever been blindsided by a partner leaving after what seemed like a stable relationship, drop a comment below, because this pattern is far more common than anyone discusses openly, and understanding it is the first step toward preventing it from happening again. The hard truth is that many neurodivergent men go through multiple long-term relationships that follow this exact trajectory. Everything seems fine, or fine enough, for years. Then suddenly, usually when the woman is in her late 30s or 40s, she announces she is done. She files for divorce, or she moves out, or she simply tells you the relationship is over. And from your perspective, this makes no sense because nothing major happened. There was no affair, no huge fight, no catastrophic event. But from her perspective, everything happened. Years and years of unmet needs, of feeling alone in the relationship, of compensating for your challenges, of making herself smaller to accommodate your limitations. And the moment her brain stops being willing to accommodate, the moment that hormonal and neurological shift happens, she sees clearly that she cannot continue living this way. The gap between your internal experience and her perception of your behavior creates a tragic misunderstanding that often cannot be bridged. You know that you love her. You know that you care deeply about her well-being. You know that you are trying your best to be a good partner. You show up to work every day to provide financially. You maintain the home. You are faithful. You fulfill your responsibilities as a parent if you have children. In your mind, you are doing everything a partner is supposed to do. But she is measuring the relationship by a completely different metric. She is measuring whether she feels seen, heard, valued, desired, understood, prioritized. She is measuring emotional connection. She is measuring whether you notice her needs without her having to explain them. She is measuring whether you initiate physical affection. She is measuring whether you prioritize time with her over your special interests or your routines. And by those measures, you are failing catastrophically, even though you have no idea that those are the measures that matter to her. You think you are succeeding at the relationship because you are doing what you think relationships require. She thinks you are failing at the relationship because you are not doing what she needs relationships to provide. And neither of you is wrong. You are just operating from incompatible frameworks. The challenge with neurodivergent and neurotypical partnerships is that the neurotypical partner often spends years trying to explain what they need, but the neurodivergent partner literally cannot fully understand what is being asked of them, because it requires intuiting and responding to needs that are never going to be obvious to a neurodivergent brain. She tells you she needs you to be more present. You think you are present because you are physically there. She tells you she needs more emotional connection. You think you provide that by talking to her every day. She tells you she needs you to prioritize her. You think you do that by making sure bills are paid and responsibilities are met. She tells you she needs you to notice when she is struggling. You think she should just tell you if something is wrong. Every conversation is two people speaking different languages without a translator. And eventually, she stops trying to explain because she realizes you will never understand in the way she needs you to understand. Not because you are stupid or uncaring, but because your brain is not wired to perceive relationships the way hers is. The mask that many neurodivergent men wear in professional and social settings often comes off completely at home. And this creates a dynamic where your partner sees a version of you that nobody else sees. At work, you might manage to maintain focus, meet deadlines, communicate appropriately, and present as competent and functional. With friends, you might be able to engage in conversation, show interest, and appear socially adept for the few hours you spend together. But all of that requires tremendous effort. You are manually running programs that neurotypical people run automatically. You are consciously monitoring your behavior, forcing yourself to make eye contact, scripting conversations, suppressing your natural responses, and pushing through sensory discomfort. That kind of masking is exhausting. So when you get home, the mask comes off. You shut down. You retreat into your special interests. You stop monitoring social cues. You stop forcing yourself to engage. You let your guard down completely. This is natural. This is necessary for your mental health. You cannot maintain the mask constantly. But what your partner sees is that you can be present and engaged and socially appropriate for everyone else, but not for her. She sees you laugh and joke with coworkers, but then come home and barely speak. She sees you focus intently on projects at work, but then seem unable to focus on anything she says. She sees you manage professional responsibilities, but then seem incapable of managing household tasks. From her perspective, you are choosing to show up for everyone else while giving her only what is left over. She does not understand that what is left over is all you have. She does not understand that you already used every bit of your capacity just to get through the workday. She thinks you are prioritizing strangers over her. She thinks you care more about your job than your marriage. And when she hits her 40s and starts evaluating what she is getting from the relationship, she realizes she is getting the worst version of you, while everyone else gets the best version. The pattern recognition abilities that often come with neurodivergent brains can actually make relationship problems worse instead of better. You notice patterns, you see systems, you understand how things work mechanically and logically. So when your partner tries to explain that she is unhappy in the relationship, your brain immediately starts analyzing the pattern. You identify specific complaints she has. You develop a logical plan to address those complaints. You might even implement changes based on what she has told you she needs. But here is the problem. Relationships are not mechanical systems that respond predictably to inputs. Human emotions do not follow logical patterns. Your partner is not a problem to be solved. When you approach the relationship like a system to be optimized, she feels even more unseen because you are treating her like a project instead of a person. She tells you she needs more emotional connection, and you schedule date nights. You think you solved the problem. She feels like you are checking a box on a list. She tells you she needs you to notice when she is upset, and you start asking her every day if something is wrong. You think you address the concern. She feels like you are following a script instead of actually tuning into her emotional state. The very abilities that make you excellent at your work or your special interests actually create more distance in your romantic relationship because they lead you to approach human connection as a problem to solve rather than an experience to share. The time perception challenges that come with many forms of neurodivergence destroy trust in ways that are nearly impossible to repair. When you lose track of time, you are not making a choice to be late or to forget something important. Your brain literally does not perceive the passage of time the same way neurotypical brains do. Hours pass and it feels like minutes. You get absorbed in something, and the next thing you know, it is 3 hours later than you thought. You genuinely believe you have more time than you actually do. You underestimate how long tasks will take. You forget that something needs to happen at a specific time because the deadline does not create urgency in your brain until it is already passed. None of this is intentional, but your partner only sees the outcome. She sees that you missed your anniversary dinner because you lost track of time. She sees that you forgot to pick the kids up from school because the time just slipped away from you. She sees that you are consistently late to events that matter to her. She sees that you make commitments and then fail to follow through because the future commitment does not feel real to you until suddenly it is in the past. Each incident chips away at her trust. She stops believing you when you say you will do something because experience has taught her that your sense of time cannot be relied upon. And by her 40s, she is done making excuses for you. She is done explaining to family and friends why you are late again. She is done feeling disappointed when you forget something that was important to her. She is done organizing her life around your inability to track time accurately. Here is something that therapists often get wrong when couples come in with these dynamics. The therapist sees a man who seems disconnected and a woman who seems angry, and the therapist focuses on improving communication or reconnecting emotionally. But the fundamental issue is not that you are not communicating well enough. The fundamental issue is that you have incompatible neurological operating systems. You can learn communication techniques all day long, but you cannot fundamentally change how your brain processes social information, emotional cues, sensory input, time perception, executive function, and relationship needs. She can learn to express her needs more clearly all day long, but you still might not be able to meet those needs because they require automatic processes that your brain does not run automatically. The therapy often fails because it is trying to solve a compatibility problem with communication tools. It is like trying to get a Mac and a PC to work together by teaching them both to speak louder. They are running different operating systems. Speaking louder does not fix that. And by the time a woman in her 40s drags her neurodivergent partner to therapy, she usually is not going because she thinks the relationship can be saved. She is going so she can tell herself and others that she tried everything before she left. The special interests that bring you joy and help regulate your nervous system become a source of deep resentment for partners who feel like they can never compete with those interests for your attention. You might spend hours researching a topic that fascinates you, learning everything there is to know, engaging in online communities about it, dedicating mental energy and time and passion to understanding it completely. This is how your brain achieves regulation. This is how you process the overwhelm of existing in a neurotypical world. Your special interests are not hobbies the way neurotypical people have hobbies. They are essential to your mental health. But your partner sees you spending 3 hours deep in research about something obscure while she sits alone watching television. She sees you able to focus intensely for hours on your interest, but unable to focus for 15 minutes on a conversation she needs to have with you. She sees you light up when talking about your special interest in a way you never light up when talking to her. She sees the excitement and engagement and passion you bring to these interests and wonders why you never bring that energy to your relationship with her. And over the years, she stops interrupting you when you are engaged with your interests, because she has learned that you get frustrated when pulled away from them. She stops sharing her own interests because you struggle to feign enthusiasm about things that do not naturally interest you. She stops expecting you to choose her over your interests because the pattern is clear. And by her 40s, she is done competing for your attention with inanimate objects and abstract concepts. She wants a partner who is present with her, who chooses her, who gets excited about spending time with her. And you cannot give her that, not because you do not love her, but because your brain needs those special interests to function. If this is painting a painful picture of your own relationship dynamics, hit that like button and subscribe, because understanding these patterns is how you prevent repeating them, and there is more you need to hear about what actually drives these relationship endings. The truth is that many of these relationships end not because of any single issue, but because of the cumulative weight of thousands of small moments where the neurodivergent partner could not give what the neurotypical partner needed, and the neurotypical partner compensated for what the neurodivergent partner could not do. And that works until it suddenly does not work anymore. The rejection sensitivity that many neurodivergent men experience creates a painful paradox in relationships. Your nervous system might be wired to experience rejection or criticism more intensely than the average person. A minor comment that a neurotypical person would brush off might trigger a significant emotional response in you. You might perceive rejection in neutral statements. You might shut down when you sense disapproval. You might avoid situations where you could be criticized. This makes you emotionally fragile in ways that your partner has to constantly manage. She has to be careful about how she phrases things so you do not feel attacked. She has to soften her feedback so you do not spiral. She has to praise you more than feels natural, because you need that reassurance. She has to avoid expressing disappointment, even when you let her down, because your rejection sensitivity makes it difficult for you to hear that you hurt her. Over the years, she learns to suppress her own feelings to protect yours. She learns that she cannot be fully honest with you about her frustrations, because you will experience that honesty as rejection, and then she will end up comforting you instead of getting her needs addressed. This dynamic slowly suffocates the relationship because she can never actually tell you how she feels. And when she hits her 40s and her capacity for accommodation runs out, she realizes she has spent years walking on eggshells around your emotions, while you remained largely unaware of hers. The working memory challenges that often accompany neurodivergence create a specific kind of relationship damage, where your partner feels like nothing she says actually matters because you will not remember it anyway. Working memory is your brain's ability to hold and manipulate information temporarily. It is what allows you to remember what someone said at the beginning of a conversation by the time you get to the end of the conversation. It is what allows you to remember the 3 things your partner asked you to pick up at the store. It is what allows you to track the details of an ongoing situation without having to be reminded repeatedly. When working memory is impaired, information just does not stick unless it gets transferred to long-term memory through repetition or emotional significance. So your partner tells you something important about her day, and 5 minutes later you have forgotten what she said. She asks you to do 3 things and you remember one of them. She explains how she feels about a situation, and the next time it comes up, you seem to have no recollection of her perspective. She tells you details about her life, her friends, her work, her family, and those details just do not register for you. From your perspective, your brain is just not good at holding on to that kind of information, and there is nothing malicious about it. From her perspective, if you actually cared about her and her life, you would remember these things. She interprets your memory challenges as evidence that she does not matter to you. She feels like she is constantly repeating herself. She feels like you do not listen, and by her 40s, she is exhausted from being the only person in the relationship who remembers anything important. The emotional regulation differences between neurodivergent and neurotypical brains create situations where your partner has to manage not just her own emotions, but yours as well. Emotional regulation is your ability to identify, understand, and modulate your emotional responses. Many neurodivergent people experience emotions intensely and struggle to bring themselves back to baseline after getting activated. You might go from calm to furious very quickly when something triggers you. You might stay upset for hours or days after something that a neurotypical person would recover from in minutes. You might shut down completely when overwhelmed instead of being able to talk through what is happening. You might not have language for what you are feeling. You just know you feel bad, and you need to withdraw, or you need to engage in a soothing behavior, or you need everything to stop. Your partner learns your emotional patterns. She learns what triggers you. She learns how to de-escalate you. She learns when to leave you alone and when to intervene. She essentially becomes responsible for regulating your emotions in addition to regulating her own. And this is exhausting. This is constant work. This means she cannot fully relax because she is always monitoring your emotional state and adjusting her behavior to prevent you from getting dysregulated. By the time she hits her 40s, she realizes she has been managing the emotional climate of the entire relationship by herself. She realizes that you have never had to manage her emotions because she manages them herself, but she has spent years managing yours, and she is done. She wants a partner who can regulate their own emotions, who can handle life's ups and downs without needing constant external support, who can be a source of stability instead of someone who requires stabilizing. The literal thinking that characterizes many neurodivergent minds creates communication breakdowns that seem absurd to neurotypical partners, but are completely logical from your perspective. When your partner says she needs help with something, you wait for her to ask for specific help, instead of noticing what needs to be done and doing it. When she says she wants you to be more romantic, you do not know what that means concretely, so you do nothing. When she says the kitchen is a mess, she means she wants you to clean it. But you hear a factual statement about the state of the kitchen. When she says she is fine, you take that at face value even though her tone and body language clearly indicate she is not fine. Your brain processes language literally and logically. Her brain uses language to convey emotional subtext and implicit requests. This creates a dynamic where she feels like she has to spell out everything explicitly, like she is managing a child instead of partnering with an adult. And the thing is, even when she does spell things out explicitly, your brain might resist because the request does not make logical sense to you. She asks you to just sit with her without doing anything else, and you think that is a waste of time because you could be doing something productive. She asks you to notice when she needs help without her having to ask, and you think that is unreasonable because you are not a mind reader. She asks you to remember that she does not like certain things without her having to remind you every time, and you think she should just tell you in the moment because your brain does not store that information accessibly. Every interaction requires translation work that she has to do, and by her 40s she is done translating. The routine dependence that helps neurodivergent people manage their daily lives becomes a cage that neurotypical partners feel trapped inside. You need structure. You need predictability. You need to know what is happening when so you can mentally prepare. Changes to plans create anxiety. Spontaneity feels threatening. Disruptions to your routine can derail your entire day. So you build elaborate systems and schedules that allow you to function. And your partner learns that she cannot deviate from these systems without causing you significant distress. She cannot suggest a spontaneous weekend trip without you getting anxious about the things you had planned to do. She cannot invite friends over without checking your schedule and mental state. She cannot decide to try a new restaurant on the fly because new places require mental preparation for you. She cannot have flexibility or spontaneity or surprises because your need for routine dominates everything. Over the years, her life becomes smaller and smaller, constrained by your need for predictability. And in her 40s, when her brain is telling her to start living for herself, she realizes that living with you means she cannot do that. She cannot be spontaneous. She cannot make changes. She cannot shake things up. The routine that helps you survive feels like a prison to her. The fundamental tragedy of these relationship endings is that both people are experiencing genuine pain, but cannot fully understand the other person's experience. You are doing your absolute best to function in a world that is not designed for your neurology. You are working harder than neurotypical people can understand, just to manage daily life. You are compensating constantly for challenges that others do not face. You are exhausted from masking and conforming and trying to meet expectations that do not align with how your brain works. And you love your partner. You want the relationship to work. You genuinely do not understand why she is unhappy when you are trying so hard. From your perspective, she is asking you to be someone you are not, to have capacities you do not have, to notice and respond to things that are invisible to you. But she is also experiencing genuine pain. She has spent years or decades being the flexible one, the accommodating one, the one who manages everything and everyone. She has made herself smaller to fit around your limitations. She has suppressed her needs to avoid overwhelming you. She has done emotional and mental labor that you did not even recognize was being done. And she is exhausted. And when her brain hits that inflection point in her 40s where she stops being willing to sacrifice her own well-being for the relationship, she has to choose herself. And that means leaving. Understanding this pattern does not mean the outcome is inevitable. But it does mean that if you are a neurodivergent man in a relationship, you need to recognize that your partner is probably compensating for your challenges in ways you do not see. She is probably doing invisible labor to make the relationship function. She is probably suppressing needs and frustrations that she has tried to communicate, but you did not fully grasp. And if you wait until she is done accommodating, it will be too late. The time to address these dynamics is now, before the resentment becomes insurmountable, before her capacity for patience runs out, before she looks at you one day and realizes she cannot do this anymore. That requires you to actively work on understanding how your neurodivergence affects her, even when that impact is not obvious to you. It requires you to compensate for your own challenges instead of expecting her to compensate for them. It requires you to recognize that her needs are just as valid as your limitations. It requires you to prioritize the relationship even when your brain does not naturally prioritize it. And it requires you to understand that love is not enough if the daily lived experience of being your partner is exhausting and lonely and one-sided. These relationship patterns repeat because neurodivergent men often do not realize what is happening until it has already happened. They go from relationship to relationship, wondering why it keeps ending the same way, not understanding that the way their brain works creates specific challenges that accumulate over time until the partner cannot take any more. If you understand this now, you have a chance to do something about it, before you lose someone else who mattered to you.